It was a monster mash as the Ghost Racing Cup Series took on Dover and Miles the Monster, and it was quite the event to see. We're going to recap all of it for you right here on the Spin Move iRacing Network. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Spin Move iRacing Network Featured League Race Recap as we take a look at our featured league, the Ghost Racing Cup Series, as they took on Dover and Miles the Monster. And it was quite the event to watch, and we are excited to recap some of those points with you. My name is Zach, and I'm here joined with David. Say hi to the internet.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Zach. Glad to recap this race. As you said, taking on the Monster Mile of Dover. And, some great things that came out of this week. And I'm really excited to go over all of it here with you, Zach.
Yeah, and so we're going to take a look here at the rundown of the Dover 200 race recap. As always, we're going to take a look at the top finishers and who are they chasing in points coming out of Dover. You're going to be surprised at some of the names that we're going to cover here. Some newcomers that we don't really talk about, but we both are really excited to cover. We're also going to talk about how this league moved from a difficult experience in Richmond and turned it into a positive, a big learning event here at Dover for all of these drivers, and really excited to talk about the positive movement that we are seeing from this league, and we hope you as fans are seeing from this league moving forward. We're also going to talk about different pit strategies and how, when we predict it, it does come true. Tires were king at Dover, and we definitely got different race strategies throughout the time together, and we're excited to break that down. And then we're also going to talk about some late race drama and how this race was not without its fireworks, but regardless, that's short track racing for you. But David, we're going to talk about our top finishers first. So we're going to take a look here at the top 10. Chris Reese. This race is proving to us that one, new guys are going to be seen at a different style of track like Dover. And this league is proving to us that when you win one time, you're probably not going to win again because there's lots of parity in this league with Chris Reese pulling the victory here at Dover.
Indeed. And, talking about Chris Reese, I just want to look back at the last couple of weeks here, the start of our season. Week one, Chris Reese at Daytona had a number 11 finish. Moving on to the next week at Atlanta, number 3. And then last week at Richmond, had a number 5 finish. So for him to be in the winner's circle this week, he is definitely showing that consistency. And moving forward, I would expect to see him continue to do well in this series and race well and get those high finishes and consistent finishes throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we're at a point in the year now where the contenders are starting to emerge. Those who had difficult starts this season are now rebounding, and those who are pretenders are starting to fade. But regardless, Chris did a great job in managing his equipment and making his way through the field methodically throughout the race. He's a very patient racer. SRM, sponsored by ESPN, covered him pretty extensively moving through the field, and they were quoted as saying, this is a guy, he's not very flashy, but he is very patient, he's methodical, he's meticulous, and you gotta have to do that at a track like Dover. So good job to Chris. You earned that one, and great to see the battles that played out here towards the end of this one. But David, as we take a look here in the top 10, name one driver that stands out to you.
Through the top 10 here, I would like to highlight the number 10 driver, Wally Babb. And same thing that I did with Chris Reese. I'm looking back through the first few weeks here in the Ghost Racing Cup Series, and I see that Wally struggled with some finishes here early on. So maybe there's an upswing. Week one at Daytona, he had a 32nd place finish. Week two at Atlanta, 28th. last week, Richmond 26th. This week pulls out a top 10. So maybe some change in momentum for Wally and things looking up for the rest of the season. Be interested to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some guys with some crazy stories coming out of Dover. I know Brock Whitehead wanted me to cover his tremendous run at Dover, coming from deep in the field to turn around and finish eighth. But Brock, I'm sorry. Wes Fuller outdid you today, and that's the guy I want to cover. Wes really needed a continuation of some strong efforts from him as of late, and here he is, finished in fourth. Wes started 31st, and to do that at Dover is quite the feat. To have a chance to win and start that deep in the field, Wes took care of his equipment, survived the late race drama, and made sure that he was in a position to compete towards the end of this thing. So good job, Wes. Tipping my cap to you, and I'm excited to see some of these stories. Really, you could talk about a number of these guys here in the top finishers as feel good stories, and really, as you talked about, momentum starting to build for these drivers leaving Dover. Any final thoughts of our top 10 before we move on to points?
I think we hit some of those really good high points. The only other thing that I would highlight is stage points are key. And, looking into our top 10 in points, we will highlight that even more.
Yeah, so let's take a peek here, David. They're not chasing Trey anymore. They're chasing Kyle Spees as he takes over the points lead. Name one driver out of here that's really caught your eye.
I'm looking down at the number 9 position of Jeffrey Vickery. We've raced with him in other leagues, and we're racing with him here in the Ghost Racing Cup Series, and he is proving to me that he is consistent and getting those finishes that he needs to be in contention come the end of this season. Looking at it right now, he's 100 points back, but as I mentioned just a moment ago, stage points, bonus points, all these opportunities to gain a ton of momentum and climb up that leaderboard, especially as we continue throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they're all chasing Kyle Spees. Kyle's been really consistent. He's been very quick no matter where we go, and really excited to see what he can now do from the points lead and really kind of deal with the pressure, right? You are now going into the race with a big target on your back. Everybody's going to be talking about you. Everybody knows that you are the guy that they're chasing when it comes to the point situation here. So really excited to see how Kyle deals with the pressure. But the guy I want to talk about is sitting in, he is right about there, 7th place. And we talked about last week what a storyline it would be if John Garrett went back to back at Dover. Didn't quite get the job done, but he was very meticulous early on and made sure that he was noticed throughout the race. And John is that kind of driver that doesn't push too hard. If you're racing around John, you're doing something right. And at the end of this thing, John is going to continue to show a certain benchmark to these drivers of what it means to be consistent as the season goes on. So I'm very curious. Right now, he's 83 back. I'm very curious to see how he competes with some of these drivers who are second, first, third every single week versus a guy like John who very well could get a win, right? But he wasn't in our top 10 this week. So, but rest assured that he takes care of the equipment. He makes sure that he minimizes those bad days. That's what's important about staying in the top 10 in points. And I'm really curious to see John's journey moving forward through the points system. We're going to move over to our rundown, and I just want to break down with the folks that are watching the very real reality of this league and how they rebounded tremendously from Richmond. A very difficult experience for these guys. Many cautions. We jokingly called it on the recap show last week the pace lap simulator that was Richmond, and they learned from that. They grew from those experiences, and ultimately we talked about in the pre-race show, David, where practice was the key. They made sure that many sessions were open for drivers to go and put in the work and really put on a good show. They really did that here. There were some points where there were cautions, especially late in the race, and we're going to cover that. But we did see a lot of green flag racing, a lot of competitive racing at a very difficult racetrack. So, David, if you could pick one area where these guys were struggling at Richmond and you saw growth here at a very difficult track like Dover, what would it be?
I to take a look at the restarts from Richmond last week. From a spectator point of view, I recall several incidents on restarts that led to caution flags and, you know, guys spinning tires, not giving each other enough space, things that you would expect at a short track. But then moving this week into Dover, it was really emphasized that just because the green flag drops doesn't mean you can go right away. And I found myself in those positions. I was at the back of the field at times, and there were cars just stacking up in front of me, but everybody around me understood that, and we weren't getting into the gas right away and just running up into the bumpers of people in front of us just because we could. You had to take your time and really ease into it, and especially a tough track like Dover where you're on concrete, you're probably going to spin those tires, especially if you're on old tires. I think drivers did a really great job. There was something like maybe one caution off of a restart where, you know, things happen. So, really props to everybody in this league for taking their time working on those things because that's something that you can't get from a practice session. So, props to everybody and keeping it clean off the restarts.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree that restarts was probably one of the biggest areas of growth that I saw from these guys throughout from last week into this week. I also saw car control become a bigger topic of emphasis. Last week at Richmond, guys were just spinning out all by themselves. And yeah, I get it. Richmond's kind of a difficult track in terms of exit of corners, but so is Dover, right? Dover's notorious for the exit of corners and the wall leaping out and grabbing you. And yeah, towards the end of the race where these drivers pushed really hard, that became an issue, but it wasn't an issue throughout the whole race. And these guys worked really hard to make sure that this was going to be a good product out there on the racetrack. And just a lot of growth from car stability standpoint, from boundary standpoints, from understanding one another's standpoint, especially in the restart zone. So lots of props to this league. This is what a league looks like, guys. If you are getting plugged in to league play and iRacing, you want to see this from leagues from a week to week basis. You don't want to wait half a season for guys to get over these kinds of issues because it's never going to happen. There needs to be a direct emphasis from leadership right away. This league did that, and they were very staunchy about penalties. They're very strict about understanding. Hey, there needs to be practice. You have to work hard, and because ultimately these racers, they just want to have fun, and you can't really have fun if you're just pacing the whole time. So if you're getting plugged into league play, this is the kind of growth you want to see from your league when you come off of a difficult week into a potentially more challenging week, right? From Richmond to Dover. And you can see the product on the racetrack. Tremendous growth from these guys. So kudos to you, from us to you as competitors out there. But let's talk about how tires were a huge topic of conversation. David, we talked about that a lot. What are your thoughts on the different tire strategies that we saw? What happened during this race with tires, and kind of walk us through why tires became so important here at this track?
I think a lot of the tire situation really played into the length of our green flag runs. There were a couple of runs throughout this race that really pushed these drivers to take care of their equipment and tires, which usually ended in a caution flag. And then you had drivers that, looking at the stages and how the stages played out, were taking their chances and maybe not going to the pit and grabbing that fresh set of tires. So, as we talked about, the restarts, You had drivers on old tires up near the front because they didn't go to the pit, and then drivers on fresh tires right behind them. I think that all the drivers did a fantastic job, as we already mentioned, on those restarts with old tires. But I think that everyone could have done a better job at some point, and I'm sure all drivers always look at this when they get done with a race of where could I have saved more tires? How could I have been more competitive come the end of this race? And there were several incidents that I think we could attribute to guy on old tires just started sliding up the track or maybe didn't have as much traction as he thought he did, and it caused an incident or two.
Yeah, absolutely. And uh, as we really break down this kind of multi-strategy racing, this is what makes iRacing so much fun, right? The challenge of, okay, am I going to gamble and give up my track position and move to the back and fly through the field through these last 20 laps and try to get stage points? That's so important in this league to understand. Am I racing for the end of the race, or am I racing for stages right now? Where am I in the racetrack to make those decisions? I was dumb. We talked about it on the radio moving through the race, where both instances in stage one and stage two, the caution came out at the same time, about 20 laps ago, between the where you were in the race and the end of the stage. So drivers had about 30 laps on their tires. You can go 60 laps on gas here, and I was dumb. So I made the choice of going, you know what? I'm going to stay out. I think I got the car underneath me to move forward. But in both of those instances, I was one of the last cars in those lines of guys who made that choice, which meant I was the first guy in line to get passed. And those kinds of decisions are really difficult as a driver. Now you're just surviving, and you're hoping that at some point those tires even out. And they did for me personally. I mean, it was around anywhere between 15th and 22nd, depending on what stage we were in, and where I really found myself towards the end of those stages. But the reason why I made those choices is because at the end of the race, it put me in a position where I had an extra set of tires. I was in that front group there at the end. Personally, I was as high as seventh or eighth, and with 15 laps to go, and then seemingly everything just kind of exploded. So tires were king here, but let's quickly talk about how there was quite a bit of late race drama here at Dover. Guys getting into it with RC, guys getting into it with other drivers, myself included. Just short tempers coming out here at the end. David, is this a testament to the driver's patience throughout the race, or do you see this as not necessarily something we should praise, but something that we still need to work on, that this league still needs to work on moving forward? There's quite a number of cautions in the last 15 or so laps of this thing.
A few cautions that probably could have been avoided at the end of this race. But as far as the driver conduct goes, I think that you can speak to it maybe a little more than I can. That the radio at Richmond, at least from a spectator point of view and from hearing race control chime in a couple of times on the broadcast, was maybe a little bit more active, especially early on at Richmond compared to later here at Dover. We did have one driver that lashed out at race control, and now he is accepting his EOL, I believe, in the next race. So, you know, everybody has those moments, loses their temper, but we have to keep in mind that, believe it or not, this was an improvement from the week before. And then, the incidences at the end of the race. I got caught up in one of them and ended up getting knocked out. Those are things that happen, and you just have to be really aware of what's happening on track around you. In my case, I couldn't slow down in time. So it's one of those things. I didn't hop on the radio right away and yell at anybody. I was in the right state of mind at that point to not yell at anyone. But I was mad, of course. So there are some improvements that have been made. And I think as we continue forward and really start to understand these drivers, we're only in week 4. As drivers start to understand each other and make those communications off the racetrack, I think things will greatly improve in this league.
Yeah, really excited to see growth from these guys as they continue to move forward. I'm like you. I see this as a glass half full moment with these drivers, right? There was some wrecks at the end, and it cost some guys some really stellar finishes, but it didn't last the whole race. And it was just kind of condensed in the last 15 laps. And at the end of the day, it wasn't the whole thing. So that's progress. And this league has made a very conscious effort to continue to work on conduct, continue to produce the best racing it can for its drivers and the fans that are watching. So late race drama, sure, but vastly improved from where they were. And like you said, it's only week 4. So these guys are growing together, learning together. Really exciting to take a look at a new league and go, where are they going to go? How are they going to find themselves? And definitely they're learning a lot from each other. So, David, we are just about out of time, but any final words from Dover as we leave the Monster Mile?
For now, we're stepping away from short tracks. Looking forward, we have Pocono coming up. I want to just take the time to remind drivers this isn't the last time, especially if you're going to be staying in this league, that we will be racing at short tracks. They're going to come around again. So keep in mind the things that we learned, and they don't just apply at short tracks. All these things can be applied to every single track we race. So looking forward to growing with these guys and learning with these guys, and heading to our home track here in this next week for Pocono. So looking forward to that and covering all of that with you, Zach.
I think every Pennsylvanian can agree. We wish we had a better home track, but we have Pocono, so we're going to try to do well there. But regardless, until we meet again talking about the pre-race at Pocono, my name is Zach, and for my partner David, I am honored to be here with you and to conduct this show with you. And until we meet again, guys, remember to keep on racing.